Okay,
Right.
because then it's,
Thank
and,
you.
and then it's posted tomorrow on YouTube, where it will be seen by people around the world who haven't had a chance to get their own copy of the book yet. Should we get started, Magda?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like to welcome Mr. James Lapine and Mr. Foster Hirsch for a wonderful evening of conversation. So I will turn this over to Foster.
Okay, thank you, Magda. We're all thrilled to have James Lapine, a legendary theater man, talking to us about his fabulously successful book. And I'm not kidding, so successful you can't find a copy in New York City, called Putting It Together, How Stephen Sondheim and I Created Sunday in the Park with George. I have to say, Mr. Lapine, I think part of the appeal of the book is that the structure is so unusual. And for those in our audience who don't have their copies yet, could you give us a little background about why you chose the structure that you chose, which is very unusual. It may not be the kind of book that people think it is.
Yeah, well, I had no idea that I was doing something that was unexpected. Because I'm a dramatist, what I did is try to track down as many people as I possibly could who were involved in the event. And I recorded their interviews, and then in weaving together my story, the book goes between my own narration and the recollections of all the people that were there at the time. And that then became a challenge, an interesting challenge of who you put together, who with what's interview and who's talking about what and who likes this one and who doesn't like that one. And so it's, I did want to make it a story though, I think my daughter read it and she said, it's kind of like reading a movie script or something, it has it has real dialogue in it as you would have in a play or a movie. And I like that because I like creating characters, or in this case, revealing characters. And that's kind of the form of the book, but it is chronological. It does not vary from. What I found interesting when I sat down to write it was that it took George Seurat 2 years to paint his painting, Sunday on the Island with George. And it ended up taking Steve and I 2 years to write the musical based on the painting Sunday in the Park with George. And then I found that we did that exactly 100 years after he did it. So even after all this time, it was interesting to discover things about the show that I didn't know.
But as I was reading the book and involved in the structure of the book, it seemed to me that your approach, consciously or not, echoes the pointillist approach of Seurat himself. That your book is pointillist. It's an opinion here, an opinion there, a recollection here, a recollection there, and then we, the readers, have to put it all together. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And the way the show came together is the way the book comes together, because that's the drama and the story of the book, is how you had a blank page and we somehow took 2 years and filled it all in, and it became a musical called Sunday in the Park. So yeah, I think that's more than a fair assessment.
So we get a lot of voices. It's a polyphonic book, though you and Sondheim are by all means the principal voices in this text. You guys are sort of in charge, but we hear from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And people have their own points of view.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with the theater is you as a writer start, whether it's a play or a musical, with yourself if you're just a playwright, or with your collaborator if you're writing a musical. And as you do it, you start gathering other people along the route. Eventually you have to have a director, eventually you need a producer, eventually you have to have a place to put it on, etc. So what begins in a room with 1 or 2 people, by the end of the thrust of it all, is a group of 60 people sometimes who
yes, but what emerges though from the book is that the flavor and character of this musical is unique. It is not really a group endeavor. It's the handiwork of you and Sondheim, and other people came along with you to realize your vision. It's an extraordinarily unusual musical. And so it
Well,
seemed to me after all these years, a sort of one of a kind, strange bird, fabulous musical.
you
But
know, it's
there's
so
no
funny.
template for it.
I know, but when you sit down to write something, you don't go, oh, I'm going to write a really unusual musical that, nobody's going to ever seen before. And it's going to be, blah, blah. You just sit down and write what's floating around in your head, and my head was pretty stirred up in those days. So I did, but I never thought of it as being as unusual as it was, because I was at that point a very downtown avant-garde influenced beginner in the theater. So to me, I think it was all of the things you said, but for a Broadway audience, it was very unusual.
Very unusual.
Yeah.
Really unusual. But we have to go back to first causes. You had the extraordinary good fortune to become Stephen Sondheim's collaborator. And so people reading the book, people listening to you now will want to know how that introduction happened. How did you get access to this genius?
Life is funny. First of all, I should begin by further saying, as I said, I was not I did not start in the theater. I did not work in the theater until I was in my late 20s. It just wasn't a passion of mine. I'm a visual person. I went to art school, graduate art. I studied history, liberal arts college, and then went to art school. And so the irony is that Stephen Sondheim was just a kind of name that rang a bell, but I didn't know why. And I had seen only one of his musicals, which was Sweeney Todd. And I was toiling in downtown in the arty-farty world. And fortunately, he was somebody who liked going downtown to the arty-farty world. So when I was introduced to him by a Broadway producer about this kind of idea I had for a show, which is, I won't bore you with the details of that, I had no expectation that he was going to be interested. I was very surprised to learn that not only did he know who I was, but that he had attended. I had only done, I think, maybe 3 shows total, and I think he attended all 3. So
Was one of them 12 Dreams?
Yes, that's the one he really took a
Yeah,
shine to.
but that was extraordinarily visual. I saw it.
Oh, really?
It was extraordinarily elegant and visual.
Yeah.
And it must have caught his attention. And he
No,
must have thought, this man has an eye.
Well, when the producer, Lewis Allen, called him to see if he would be interested in meeting with me, he said he'd love to meet me. He didn't say I'd love to work with him. He just said, oh, he's got an idea for a show. And he was coming off a Broadway flop, which was Merrily We Roll Along. And he had always worked with Hal Prince. He grew up with Hal Prince. They worked together. And I think he was licking his wounds a little bit about the show closing in 2 weeks after it had opened. And so I just think the gods were smiling on us. I think he was looking for a change. And I happened to be the one to ring the bell. So
did you at the time or subsequently compare yourself to Hal Prince, saying, I'm different from Hal Prince, or we're very different personalities? Did you have any sense of who Hal Prince was?
Not a clue. And, I had seen Sweeney Todd and I loved it so much. I saw it 3 times. So I knew of him as a director, but no, I really was a novice in the theater, and particularly the Broadway theater, and particularly musicals.
So you did not approach Sondheim as a fan at all?
No, not at all.
Nor were you an expert in his work?
No, not at all. Thank goodness. Because I think I would have walked in there very intimidated had I really known who he was and what he did. But instead, I was just, I walked in, the guy rolls a joint and before I even, I say hello, and he doesn't even ask me if I want any pot. He rolls a joint and lights it up. And I think, well, this is very relaxing. So, I didn't have, he does not come off, and even to this day, I will say it, as anybody who's a master of the art as he is. He's a very down to earth, very approachable, maybe a little shy, but just a really easy person I have found to be with.
I've interviewed him a number of times. He's extremely approachable.
Yeah.
And people, I think, expect to be intimidated by him, but that's not his aura.
But he is a genius. I mean,
He is a genius.
Over time. But I don't even mean a genius for what he writes. He's just got that brain, He's got a brain that's, 1 in a million kind of brain.
Did he say anything to you about Merrily? I know you directed a 1980 La Jolla production.
On the first meeting, no. I don't believe we discussed it. I never saw it, so I didn't know anything about it. And I think I must have known that it had closed and was not successful. But beyond that, no, I didn't know anything. And the irony of our meeting was, I don't remember what we talked about, but it wasn't show busy so much. It was a kind of freewheeling conversation, not even about the project I brought to him to consider. It was just getting to know you, where'd you grow up,
Then did you do the La Jolla Merrily after you'd collaborated on Sunday?
Yeah.
After
It was the next thing I did with Steve. Well, at all after Sunday opened. I think we immediately went into that. It's an interesting question. I don't remember whether we had begun working on Into the Woods then or not, to tell you the truth.
I saw the original Broadway production of Merrily,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not alone. I thought it was terrific.
Yeah.
I thought it was an extraordinary evening of theater. I saw it early in previews when it was unfocused, and then I saw it opening night and after opening night, and the transformation was extraordinary.
Well, it had two big things going against it. One is that and for those who don't know the show, it's based on a Kaufman and Ferber play called Merrily We're Wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong about that. But oh gee whiz, sorry. Oh, I don't know how to shut this off. Oh good, my wife got it. I'm in her office at the moment. But what's interesting is it has a device that is rather brilliant and impossible at the same time, which is you go backwards in time. But you don't go backwards because, of course, each scene goes forward, but then you're flipping back 5-10 years for the next scene. And I think it was confusing. That device was confusing for people. And then I think Hal made a enormous mistake in casting only like teenagers to do it. So I guess his thought was, well, they'll end up as teenagers at the end and everyone will go, it's so touching. But most everybody thought, like, why are these teenagers dressed as if they're, 50? And anyway, we didn't want to talk about that.
No, but when you started with Sunday in the Park with George, it was basically your idea. It was your idea.
Well, it came from, the very first show I did was a very visual show called Photograph, based on a Gertrude Stein poem play. And it was just, it was 5 acts long, but it was only 3 pages in length. So it tells you how arty-farty it was. And so I did it I just kept doing the play over and over and over again until it filled an hour. And each time I did it, I chose another image to drive that particular take on it. One of which was Sunday on the Island of La Grande Jatte, which was one of my absolute favorite paintings, and just something I was endlessly fascinated with. So the idea for doing the show wasn't so much, it was the image I brought to Steve to say, well, you want to explore this, is really what it was.
And he liked that image.
Yeah, because, we stared at it for a while and he goes, it's interesting. It looks like a stage set. you know, and it's true. It looks like a stage set, and except when you start staring at it, you begin to discover all the weirdness in it, that nobody in of the, you know, dozens of people in the painting are looking at each other. The proportions are really off of some of the people. You know, things are exaggerated, like the bustle on the lady in the foreground. And you go, well, I wonder why he put this person in the shade and he put that one in the sun. And then, of course, you know, the obvious remark was, well, is the person missing? And he said, who? And I said, the painter. So then we sort of, I think he understood, oh, it's going to be about an artist. It's not going to be about the painting. It's going to be about the guy who painted the painting. And that, of course, is something he could really relate to. So that's how we took off.
And then you spend a lot of time in the book talking about the evolution of the first act, relatively little time talking about the second act. And you say in the book, there are those who still don't buy the second act. After reading the book, I went to see Sunday in the Park on the streaming, and the play has to have that second act.
That's what we said.
The second act is crucial. It deepens the play. It's incredibly moving, that second act. But you say there are those who still don't buy the second act.
No, well, it's not that they don't buy it, that they were perfectly happy with the first act. So let's put it that way. And I think they didn't understand why the second act was there or why they should care about these characters they're meeting after intermission. And I think they didn't like, those that liked the first act didn't feel they enjoyed being wrenched out of it like we did when they came back after their, you know, gin and
Yes,
tonic.
but then when you pull it all together so that the second act comments movingly on the first act, it's of a piece.
Yeah, well, it is of a piece, and it's about the present, you know. It's it's a parallel story, and it's also speaking to us about today, and or then anyway, in the art world, which frankly has not changed. You know, ironically, the same art world they had in, you know, 1884 is not all that different than it is even today. Art worlds are art worlds. Artists don't like other artists. Everybody's fighting to get their paintings on a wall that someone will look at them and hopefully buy them. And, you know, I mean, yeah, you've got Sotheby's and all these other things, but the basic struggle of being an artist is the same.
And it feels universal and timeless. I was incredibly moved seeing it again, but I saved being really moved till the second act. That's what gets to me.
Well, yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, a lot of people were like, "Oh, the end of the first act, so moving."
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous, but I want more. So then you give us more.
Yeah.
As you were doing the book, were you surprised by anything that any of your interviewees said to you? Was there something you learned about yourself, or
yeah, I learned a lot.
You're a bit critical of yourself, or you allow some criticism of you in the book, which makes it fascinating. I mean, I'm dying to know. Ramak Ramsey left the production and refused to give an interview for the book, for instance.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to have him on next week, but maybe I'll find out. I have no idea why I did that. Well, I knew I wasn't well liked by a certain number of people. And it was pretty weird going, you know, 40 years back and asking those people today, why didn't you like me? You know, what did I do? And then when they told me, I thought, oh, well, no wonder you didn't like me. Of course, you weren't exactly wrong. So, you know, I think, and a lot of them we were very young. You have to remember, you know, Sondheim is almost 20 years older than I am. And the cast of our show was all people around my age, which was 32 or 31 at the time. So we were young and stupid, you know, when you're young and stupid, you just, and I had no skill set. So because I'd done so little work, and these were people coming in. First of all, no one was there because I was there. They were there because Stephen Sondheim was doing the show and they wanted to be part of that. So yeah, I learned a lot, but I think I wanted to write this book for people who are going into the theater, and that they would have a book that would show an experience of how a show comes together and show it from every angle. You know, there are things in the book that may not be interesting to some of you, but I have a chapter on the business side. I have a chapter on orchestrations. I have a chapter on the poster. You know, I just thought I want to cover all the bases. So I would have loved this book had I had it in, 1982. I would have known a lot more about how to direct a show.
So you intend the book for young people coming up in the theater as a kind of primer, or how a musical is put together?
Yeah, because people look at this show and it's, oh my God, it's so amazing, and da 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 da. And it's like, well, it wasn't amazing to a lot of people at the time. It had a very difficult struggle to get made. And sometimes I have found through the years that some of the most enjoyable experiences I've had writing or directing a show, the shows have not been that successful or not successful at all. And some of the worst experiences I've had have turned into very satisfying pieces of work at the end. So I think it's important for everybody, no matter what you do, to understand the kind of, there's no magic to it when you really get into the detailing of it. It's a messy business, and it's nice to have some perspective on it.
But you allow for conflict of personality. You don't try to sugarcoat anything. There were people who did not get along, and they talk about it.
Yeah, and people say to me, "Oh my God, you were so brave to write this book, and you're so honest." Even Sondheim said the first time he read it, "James, it's so honest." And I thought, well, why the hell am I going to write a book if I'm not going to be honest? I don't want to read that book. I think I have enough. I know enough about who I am now, and I have enough of a track record that I'm happy to look at my faults and my shortcomings and share them.
Have you grown as a director? Did you see yourself now compared to the young man who was putting on his Broadway show, for a first-time Broadway show?
Sure. I mean, you're only a virgin once, Once you get over that virginity thing, it's, nothing is ever going to be the same. And it's the same, that was my first Broadway show. I lost my virginity then. And everything I've done since has been compared to it. And so of course I've learned a lot, and I try to learn a lot on everything I do. And I try to pick projects that challenge me and are scary. And that's, why not? I mean, I pick projects to make money on occasion, but that was scary in a different way.
How much editing did you do of your interviewees?
Quite a lot. And in fact, I did something which I think I'm really glad I did. I filmed all of the interviews, including the ones with Steve. And there's going to be a documentary based on the book, which I think will be really interesting for folks, particularly the interviews with Sondheim, which you can't communicate in a book because we took out all the materials, all the music, all the things that you just can't cram in and give enough space to in a book. And I think that's going to be really interesting for people to be in his company.
But what comes through in the book is Sondheim's capacities as a collaborator.
Yeah.
He's a very generous interviewee. If I were the interviewer and I was getting the kinds of answers from him that he gave you, I would be very pleased. Well, he was very generous.
Well, he trusts me. I wouldn't say that he would be that way with just anyone. I think we've known each other and are so close. We're very, very close friends and confidants. And he just trusts me. He knows I'm not going to do anything. And I had done this show called, both a documentary, if you haven't seen it, on HBO, called Six by Sondheim.
Yes.
I think it's really cool. It's Steve's life around 6 songs that he wrote. But so I had done that, and I had done a musical review called Sondheim on Sondheim, which interviewed him as well. So by the time I did the book, I think he was like, here he goes again, but for me, it was such a gift to know him and work with him, my friendship aside. And I really wanted that to be something lasting, because I think in many ways he's kind of our Mozart. I think his work is never going to go away.
It's never going to go away. But what's extraordinary about the book is his voice.
Yeah.
He speaks, I know him, he speaks in this very casual way. Every word counts.
Yeah,
Every word counts without his making a fuss about it. And that comes through.
Yeah.
It's like spending hours in the company of this genius reading this book.
Huh. Well, cool.
Now, on the other hand, couldn't you get anything more out of Bernadette Peters?
Well, I don't know what you mean by that, but I'm going to assume that you didn't get enough out of Bernadette
I
Peters.
didn't. No, I didn't.
I think I got what the essence of Bernadette, which is Bernadette is not an analytical person.
Okay.
She does not analyze things. She's like the healthiest person I know. She comes in, she does her work. She doesn't fret about it. If she's got a problem, she tells you right away, I've got a problem. And she has such a fantastic disposition that, as you get in the book, Mandy Patinkin was a handful.
Oh, that comes across.
And Bernadette, in the book, I say, how did you put up with this guy every day? And she said, oh, I didn't think he was misbehaving or anything. He was being George Seurat every day. When I would get on stage in the rehearsal room with him, he was just that character, and he was living that character, and I was fine with it. So I really wish there was just some way that she could, I don't know, pass that little piece of DNA onto us, because it's
okay,
remarkable.
but she's not analytical.
She's not analytical, which is not to mean she's not critical of her work and others, but she doesn't, she simplifies everything in a very healthy way. She'll say, I don't know what I'm doing here. I have this problem with this, or, and that's very rare for starters, because she likes to kind of figure it out on her own. Also, those two people taught me what it meant to be professional and brilliant at what you do. And that is, you work like a dog. You walk through that door, you don't waste a minute. And that for me, when I did the show, is like, I was drinking beer during rehearsals on my show, and they just pulled me, they just frightened me so much in a way, because they were so professional, such hard workers. You had to have answers for them. If I wanted to rehearse something, I would rehearse it and then I would move on. They wouldn't move on. They said, no, I want to do it again. No, I want to do it again. No, I want to do it again. They were digging. And I realized, that's why they're stars,
But Mandy was more self-revealing than she was, or more self-critical. I felt he was taking a step away from himself as he was at the time he created the role, and had a sort of perspective on it.
Oh yeah, now of course, yeah. Well, he's a very different person now. He has no resemblance to the person he was then. Whereas Bernadette has just always been Bernadette. You have to remember, Bernadette started working in the business at like the age of 3 or something. That's her life. That's what she knows. Mama Rose was her mother and dragged her around, and she was on a TV show at 3, and she never stopped working since. So, when she walked into that room, she had done, several leading roles in Broadway shows with big time directors. And we were all, kind of, I don't know what the word is, putzes or whatever
I think
the word is. We were just
posterity.
Started.
Mr. Lapine, posterity is going to say that you and Hal Prince were Stephen Sondheim's most important collaborators. That's going to be theater history. Do you think of how you'll be compared? The shows are different. Sunday in the Park and Into the Woods are very different from Company and Follies and Sweeney Todd and Pacific Overtures.
You know, oh, there's Jane Klein. Hey, Jane. No, I don't give it a moment's thought. I mean, what I'm thinking about now is my next show. That's what I think about. I don't think about the ones in the past. And, you know, when I'm dead, I don't care, you know, what am I going to know what people think of me or don't think of me or him or whatever. So, you know, I just think for me, it's just a silly waste of time. It's very nice.
Okay, good. Well, I once asked Mr. Sondheim that question, and he said, "Who's going to know? He's not going to be around. Who's going to know? No, it doesn't matter."
Yeah, I think you probably asked most writers that question, and if they're still writing, that's the last thing they want to think about. You know, you want to think about what you're writing and what you're doing next, not what you did before.
Wouldn't you say Into the Woods has many similarities to Sunday in the Park structurally, an Act 2 that comments on Act 1 and changes Act 1 or deepens Act 1? It seems to me structurally they're very similar.
Yeah, okay. Yes, the answer is yes, but in very different ways, because the second act of Into the Woods is a continuation of the story. You know, the second act of Sunday in the Park is a comment on the first act. So they're really, in my mind, not really the same. And as you know, the third show, we had no intermission, so I solved that problem.
How do you? What are your feelings about Passion now? That's the one of the three shows that won the Tony Award.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. It's the shortest running show ever that won the Tony Award.
What are your feelings about that show now?
I adore that show. I think I probably didn't do the best job directing that show, but I think that show, that for me is the best of the three.
Really?
Yeah, I do, because it's very economical, very concise. Steve was the one who generated the idea for that show, and I think the score comes deepest from within him, because that was the one he was most, no pun intended, passionate about writing. And I think he relates to all those characters. So I find Passion just a perfect piece of work. You know, it's certainly not a popular piece of work, but it's, to me, it met all of our ambitions for it.
Now you have directed a revival of Sunday in the Park.
Have I?
No.
No. My niece did.
Okay, but so you don't go back to shows and redirect things that you've done.
I went back to Into the Woods because I didn't think I did such a good job on that one the first time around, and I wanted to rewrite some things, and that was instructive because I realized I didn't need to rewrite the things I thought I didn't like, and I corrected some of the directorial things that I wasn't thrilled about. And then I redid Falsettos is the second one I did a revival of, but just those two.
But normally you like to move on to new projects.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about Flying Over Sunset?
I just think every person on this call has got to go see it. That's what
okay.
I think it will be.
Oh, well.
I don't know if you'll like it, but it won't be like anything you've seen. Let me put it that way.
Okay, that's challenging.
It's even I've never. I mean, I'm like, I sit back and think, what are audiences going to make of this? I don't know. But it you know, I'm quite fond of it, which I'm not that kind of person who's fond of everything they do. But this one I think is, I've been working on it for so long, and maybe it's I feel that way about it because I've had so much time to live with it and grow with it and it to grow with me. So, and I think it's going to be an interesting show in a post-pandemic environment because the themes of the show have a lot of meaning, I think, at the moment.
That's your concept, right? The idea of the show is your
Yeah,
concept.
yeah, yeah.
Have you found being so successful in musical theater that has limited your opportunities in straight theater, or has success in the musical theater encouraged a job
Well,
off
you know what
straight?
I found was even though I wasn't that drawn to musicals when I started, I realized I love collaborating. And so my love of musicals has as much to do with being in a room with somebody else instead of sitting in a room by myself. So, but you know, I've done some plays, I've written a number of plays, and I did Act One a couple of years ago, which was
Yes.
but no, I do like collaborating.
I mean, Sondheim describes himself as a collaborative dramatist.
Okay. Okay. Good for him. I don't
Is
know.
that is that aren't you saying that about yourself as well in a way?
Oh, you mean I see what he thinks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, I don't know. You know, I'm different because I'm the director and the writer, and there aren't many of us that do that. And so I like to think that there's a kind of thing that I'm particularly drawn to doing that, you know, is unique unto myself and a very few others.
Is the template for this book, putting it together, is it something you would apply to another production of yours, or is this a unique publication?
Oh, yeah, a lot of people are saying, when can we read the Into the Woods book? And I have to respond, never, I hope. But I I have another sort of deal with the publisher to do another book. And what I want to do is a book of like 4 or 5 of my plays and librettos, but with each of them having a specific reason why I choose them. So I'll do Into the Woods, but I'll do it because it was my only really big hit, you know. And I'll choose something like Little Miss Sunshine because it was an adaptation and a flop, or you know, I want to kind of I want it for and write introductions to each so that again a young person might look at a body of work and see that some things work, some things don't work, some things succeed, some things that are really good don't really succeed, and some things that maybe aren't as good do. You know, it's an interesting alchemy of the theater and what
But
works.
it won't have the same structure as this book. It won't be a book of interviews and recollections.
No, mm-mm.
No,
It'll be more personal. It'll be almost like a little memoir of each of those shows, I
I
guess.
see. Okay, that'll be great. That'll be great. Now, a friend of mine, a number of friends of mine said I had to mention a show that they love, which many people perhaps have forgotten, but they think it's an extraordinary show and wish that it had a longer life. Amour.
Yeah, that was
That
weird.
has a huge fan base for a
Yeah,
show that
well,
ran
it
two
was
weeks.
good. You know, it was good and it was beautiful. It took a long time to find its footing, but that's a perfect example of how death by a producer, you know, that was so poorly produced. I think no matter what, if it had gotten a rave in the New York Times, I don't think it would have lasted much longer. It just was not well produced.
But you have good feelings about the show itself.
Yeah, I don't have deep personal feelings about it, but I'm proud of it and proud to have done it. I did it for all the wrong reasons, but I was not. It would be nothing. I would be. I love everything I've done to the degree that they're all been all interesting experiences. Some of them have been happy, some of them have not been happy, but who goes through life happy all the time, you know? So, but I don't begrudge any of the experiences because in many ways you learn more from the things that fail than from the things that succeed.
So when you took on a project like Diary of Anne Frank,
Yeah.
which would not fit into what we've been talking about, was that the attempt to do something different?
No, no, it was just something I wanted to spend time with. I wanted to understand that period of time in history. As a Jewish person, I wanted to understand and let people know that that existed. And I felt, I never saw the play, but having read it and seen the film versions, I didn't feel authentic to me. So I wanted to try to see if I could bring an audience into that attic and have an authentic experience of what that was like.
And did you succeed in your own terms?
Yes, I think I did. I mean, it's a tricky question because I don't read reviews, but I certainly hear about them, you know. You feel badly. Some people didn't like Natalie Portman in the lead, you know, and that hurts me because I cast Natalie Portman. And if they didn't like her, that is my responsibility, not Natalie Portman's responsibility as a director. And so, you can be wounded by the things you do, but as an experience, I'll never forget it. Because it was a very jolly rehearsal period for a long time, which you wouldn't expect from something like that material. And then I remember we were doing Annie Leibovitz, the photographer, was coming in to shoot my cast for the magazine, and we put everybody in their costumes, and they all walked into the room with the yellow star on their chest, and it was just, it was really so moving. So anyway.
Can I ask about collaborating with William Finn as opposed to Stephen Sondheim?
Yeah,
Are they two very different personalities?
Could not be more different, other than the fact they both went to Williams College. They have nothing else in common.
Nothing.
Not really. No, except they're both very bright. Bill's super smart as well. But Bill works a completely different way, completely opposite way as Steve. So,
and can you give us any supporting detail there?
Oh yeah, I mean, Bill kind of vomits. I mean, he just sits at the piano and he sometimes writes the tunes before he even have any lyrics for it, or he's all explosion and all gut in a way that Sondheim's all cerebral. Steve wouldn't show me anything until it was completely polished and finished. And that was a long process for us to trust one another in a way to show each other work that wasn't complete. So yeah, very different. And of course, Bill is my age, so we had a very different kind of relationship. I for the longest time thought of Steve as an older man and a respected man and whatever. And then by the end of Sunday, we were just friends. Didn't matter what our age difference was. And some ways I'm more mature than he was. And, so it doesn't matter. Do you want to open it up to questions? Are you going to open it up?
I'm going to ask you one more question, then we're going to open it to the house. Okay. One of the tensest parts of the book is that you're on Broadway, you're about ready to open in Sunday, and some of the songs for Act 2 haven't yet been delivered.
Yeah. That was.
How did you respond to that?
Well, that's a really good question. Because obviously I wasn't happy. I mean, who would be happy when you have an unfinished show and, 900 people coming every night with the two most important songs missing? But I just trusted him. I knew he was going to deliver it. And
you did trust, and you knew he'd come through.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I never had a doubt about it. And, I was probably a little too nice to him. I probably should have maybe put a little more pressure on him, but I just trusted him. What else can you say? By that time we were in the trenches together. It was like being in the trench with a fellow soldier. You got to trust them. And and it worked out well. So,
And then when he brought in those two great songs, you knew you had winners?
oh no, I was just grateful I had a show that was finished. That's what I was grateful for. I never thought, well, I thought the songs did exactly what they were supposed to do, exactly what we talked about them doing, exactly why we had to have them. And so, yes, I was relieved that the play was finished. Whether it was a winner or not, I had no idea.
Did you evaluate his material as it comes in? You don't evaluate in the book.
You know, at that time I didn't. I might have in the later shows. And when you say evaluate, I mean talk to him about it. And the thing about working with Steve is you talk, they're never surprises. You talk about a song being here, and then you talk about what that song is, and then I write a monologue, or I help him. He takes my dialogue to figure out why there's a song, what the song has to accomplish, what it has to say. So, there's no surprise to it. With Bill Finn, it was another kind of, what's it going to be today kind of feeling, which I enjoyed too, because it was so loopy. But, and Bill also, I would just say, well, we need this, we got to make this point. We got to, or sometimes it was, you know what, she's just got to have a song. Give this woman a song. You cast this great singer, and then you don't write her the world's best song to sing. So then it becomes, well, what's she going to sing about? And that's going to allow her to be, belt out a number that an audience will eat up. So, they're just, everybody works differently,
But with Sondheim, there was so much discussion. You knew where the songs were going to be and what they were going to accomplish.
Yeah, there were never any surprises. It was not a matter of, something being pulled out of a hat and saying, do you like this? It was, we knew where we were going always. Whether it worked or not was another story, but, we thought we knew what the song should be. And then it came in after the poor guy wrote it for months and discovered, oh, that's not really what it should be. So,
but the songs for Act 2 of Sunday are exactly what they need to be.
Yeah, and it's a terse second act. They had to deliver the goods for sure.
Yeah, for sure, and they do, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Magda, we can open the floor to questions from our listeners.
Okay, allow me to mute and then unmute. Give me a moment.
Okay, Deborah, thank you.
You may okay, allow participants. Would you all unmute yourselves then? And also, shall I just read one of the questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I always forget that you got this chat thing going on.
Isn't it? This is the digital age. Susanna Talley has written a lovely note saying, hello, Mr. Lapine. As a playwright,
she says lupine like the flower.
It says lupine. I thought you might like that. Lapine. As a playwright, I'd like to ask if LSD, psilocybin, etc., making a comeback will be old material before its theme can be presented after your play is making the stage at Lincoln Center. And she also says, bully for you for doing this play, by the way, and thank you. Can you address that?
Well, it is, old material. First of all, the play is sent in 1950s. So it's not going to be in any way, relatable per se to today. Maybe it'll be old hat. I don't know. Maybe it'll run for 2 days. I don't know.
Okay.
To me, it's less about the subject matter than what you do with the subject matter, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So whatever it is you write, there aren't very many new ideas. I think Gertrude Stein said something like, there's 5 ideas in the world. Break it down. And, you're not going to reinvent the wheel, but what you can do is make a wheel like no other wheel. And I think that's kind of what one does.
I'm going to take that personally to heart. Peter DeSouza made a little note here saying that he heard you say about Into the Woods, that the lyrics arose directly from the suggestions in the book. I don't know what that means, but that's what he wrote.
He might ask himself.
Okay.
He could ask.
Peter, are you there?
He's there. I see him, but I don't hear him. We don't hear you, Peter. Is it Peter?
Peter DeZosa?
Why is, oh, DeZosa is your last name. That's so cool.
Yes.
I thought it was like D.I. Zoza,
Yeah,
you know?
he's been, let me see if he's there. Peter,
He's-
if you're there, can you unmute and ask?
Wave.
Okay,
He's having computer problems. We'll be back to you, Peter.
okay.
Yeah, okay.
And does anybody else, I don't see any more notes, but, oh, was the Merrily book Running Backwards inspired by Pinter's betrayal running backwards? Boy,
No,
you're-
no, it's the other way around.
Okay,
You know, the Kaufman and Ferber book was far, you know, I think that was like the 30s, actually. So, you know, if anybody's copying anybody, it's Pinter.
I don't see any more notes. Does anybody want to raise their hand and unmute
could-
themselves and ask a question?
Sorry, it's so hot in this room. I'm gonna start taking my clothes off. That'll wake
Oh,
everybody.
that'll be a different kind of recording then. Anybody want to ask any more questions?
Well, can I ask you all questions if you're not gonna ask me questions?
Please.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, what are you looking forward in the pandemic? If you were to go to the theater, what kind of theater do you want to see? What would you, or movies or entertainment wise, do you want to see things that make you forget about the pandemic? Do you-
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yes.
Escapism, right.
Can I just say something? I would like to walk out of the theater and be able to hum a tune
Oh, okay.
like I used to.
Good old days.
Mhm.
Could you hum Sondheim when you saw Sondheim?
Oh, definitely.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, not all of it, but it stays in your head. It
Yeah.
does stay in your head.
Well, also now we know it, so we.
Or
you know,
maybe.
he always tells that story about, I guess it was a little night music and a weekend in the country, which he thought, God damn it, I'm going to make people hum this if it's the last thing I do. And he kept repeating it over and over and over and over that whole last scene that you had. And then, of course, everyone was walking up the aisles going, a weekend in the country, you know. I don't know. I think Flying Over Sunset, the song, is actually pretty hummable. But you'll be the judge of that, Magda.
Are your collaborators on this show new to you? Have you collaborated with them before?
I worked with Tom Kitt on a show Next to Normal. I did a little workshop reading of it, and I loved working with Tom. Tom is just a super talent and young, energetic, good-looking, charming, fun guy to be in a room with. And Michael Corey, I have never worked with, but I've always thought he's one of the absolute best lyricists we have working out there, and nobody ever pays any attention who does lyrics. And I think lyric writing is the hardest part of a musical. And I think he's exceptional at it. I don't know if any of you saw Grey Gardens,
Yes.
which he did, and the lyrics in that show are just brilliant. He's really, really good. And he knows how to get a laugh in a song, which is always good.
Is this an upbeat show because we're in such dark times? Do you come out of Flying Over Sunset feeling a little better about things?
No, that's a really good question. Because I guess, first of all, whoever you are walking in is not going to be like you're going to be somebody else walking out. I find it a deeply moving show. I wouldn't say, for me, upbeat, I don't go to the theater. I love comedies. I love happy musicals. Unfortunately, I just don't write them. But I think you'd be very satisfied. I think you would think a lot about what you saw, and I think you would be moved. That's, I could be completely wrong, but
Okay.
I find when I watch it, even though I've watched it many times, as it grows, I'm just moved by it. The same with Passion. If you like Passion, you'll like Flying Over Sunset, probably even more because it's more fun. There's a lot of fun in Flying Over Sunset.
Okay, great.
People
Great.
are romping around on LSD after all.
I see
Okay.
Alexandra has her hand up. Alexandra, would you unmute and ask your question?
I saw Six on Broadway, which I really enjoyed. It was very fun about the Six Wives of Henry VIII and the sets and the costumes were so sparkly and there was all this lights on the stage. And I really enjoyed that. That got me in a good place.
Yeah.
Have you heard good things about that show?
Well, I know people like it. I mean, and it's fun, you know.
Yeah.
I think I'm not against fun.
Yeah. It was fun.
I may not be the greatest provider of fun. But I
Thank you.
certainly love it in my life, and I love it in theater. And I think we have this incredible choreographer named Michelle Dorrance, who's a tap dancer choreographer, and I have no idea what people will make of this style of show, because she does very abstract things, and you know, some people will go, what are they doing up there, you know, and I hope people will just sit back and go, wow, what the heck's that? That's very cool, you know. I think for me, this show is an emotional show. It's about, for me, when you take a trip, you have the highest highs and the lowest lows, and that's what LSD is in my thinking. So, Neil.
Hi,
Hey,
can you hear me?
I can.
Good. For those of us of a certain age, and you and I are just about exactly the same age by a week or so, we've known about Cary Grant and Claire Booth Luce and Aldous Huxley and their experiments with LSD. We experimented with LSD, and I was just wondering what made you think there was a show in this, and how did it generate from just that idea?
Well, I was reading, somehow I came across an old article on Cary Grant, and this is before there was the more recent biography that said he took LSD in the 1950s. And I thought, oh, I didn't think there was LSD in the 1950s. If you're my age, Neil, you know what I mean. I mean, when we came to it in the 60s, and early 70s, you know, it never dawned on me that there was a time when people took it prior. It seemed to just kind of.
Well, I did, because I knew there was this old Swiss doctor in the 1930s that came up with it. Maybe I did a little bit more reading when I was not.
No, I think you're right. But did you know that people were taking it in the 50s? I didn't.
I knew that Cary Grant did, and I knew that Aldous Huxley did. I probably wasn't that into Claire Booth Luce.
Yeah. Well, I tried to write a piece about Cary Grant, and I gave up after about 30 pages and kind of forgot about it. And then I happened on, I grew up in Fairfield County for part of my life, and that's where Claire Booth Luce was the congresswoman. And if you know her, there is a biography of hers. Well, the two-part biography is one of the most amazing books you'll ever read. This woman had a life that I couldn't even begin to tell you what it was like. It was so extraordinary what she did in her lifetime, and was also a dramatist. You know, she wrote the play The Women, which was one of the very, very first Broadway productions written by a woman. She was really extraordinary.
Well, that's the movie, right? That's what the famous movie is based on.
On the play, but it's based on the Broadway play. Yeah. But what shocked me about her was that she was married to Henry Luce, who was, you know, arch conservative publisher of Life and Time. And when I discovered that she was doing LSD, I thought, okay, now we're getting on to something here.
She was married to the boogeyman.
And then I thought I'd go back and read about Aldous Huxley, because he is the one that introduced LSD in the 50s. And then I began to realize that his closest friend was the guy who was the guide to Claire Booth Luce. And then I realized Claire Booth Luce knew Cary Grant because Claire Booth Luce worked in Hollywood and Cary Grant. And I thought, oh, these three people all knew each other. And then I thought, oh, well, now we're cooking, you know? So that's kind of how the idea grew. And then I thought, it's kind of my kind of structure. So the first act is each of their very first experiences taking a trip. And the second act is the three of them taking a trip together. That's
which they probably never did, right?
Well, you don't know that, Neil.
Oh.
Magda.
Yes.
Are we done?
Yes. No, one question. What is your next project?
After Flying Over Sunset?
Yes.
I am doing 3 very different projects. I'm working on one with my wife, who has written a musical in the past and is a songwriter, based on the Nancy Drew books. So, you know, who wouldn't go from LSD to Nancy Drew, right? I'm writing a collaboration with Anna Devere Smith, a play which is about 1970 and a party that Leonard Bernstein and his wife had for the Black Panthers. That Tom Wolfe wrote an incredible article in New York Magazine called Radical Chic and turned everybody's lives upside down. And that's been just fascinating to do research on. And then I'm working with a brother and sister team, Kirsten Childs, who I don't know if you're familiar with, wonderful composer and lyricist. Her first show I saw was Bubbly Black Girl Does Her, I can't remember the whole title. She's really talented. And she is a friend, and she was always telling me about when she came to New York, because she's a little younger than I am, but she ended up staying in this terrible tenement and didn't realize when she moved in that it was a shooting gallery. It's where people came to shoot heroin. And this is this girl, you know, who was pure as snow and, you know, was suddenly, you know, had, you know, drug dealers and all these people surrounding her. And one day she heard some music and she peeked out of her door and there was Miles Davis in her hallway. And it turns out Miles Davis and his jazz chums came to this building to shoot up. And I thought, wow, that might be really interesting to write about. So we're doing that. And her brother, Billy Childs, is a very well-known jazz composer. Won many Grammy Awards and super talented. So it'll be like a strange jazz musical with strange characters. You know, I got really hooked on it because I have always tried to write a show about a building, because I'm just fascinated by New York and our buildings and how we come and go in them, and history has come and gone in them, and who lived in this apartment before I did, and you know. And so I started doing research on the building and discovered that it was designed by
Sanford White.
If I don't think so, a well-known architect who
Sanford
designed.
White.
Say again.
Sanford White.
No, Roth.
Oh, yeah,
Embry Roth, because he's Hungarian like I am.
Emery Roth, there you go. It was Emery Roth, and you know, he was a Jew and he came to New York, and of course they wouldn't let him design anything, and the Jews could never live on the east side. So he built these buildings on the west side, these aspirational buildings that are all up and down, like the El Dorado and whatnot on Central Park West. And he happened to have built this building on Riverside Drive, which was the building that she was in, which was in its day a grand building. But of course, by the time she came to New York, it was all chopped up as they do these grand apartments and made into tiny apartments. So he's a character, Emery Roth, and John Dos Passos, who's a writer who I've always loved, I discovered lived in this building in the 1920s. So I thought, this is it. This is my fate. So,
Well,
you know.
So you have three unusual musicals coming up.
Well, 2 musicals and a play.
Anna Devere Smith is not a musical.
No.
No.
well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating. It was just so wonderful to get to really know you a little bit more. And I'll say goodbye in a second, but I just want to tell everybody to come back on the 22nd of November. We're going to have Linda Gray from Dynasty. And also I'd like to invite everybody this Saturday to Tin Pan Alley Day. And it's a free concert outside opposite the Flatiron building, the plaza there, and we're going to have Marilyn May and some incredible musicians and performers. And I'd like to thank Foster for being Foster,
Yeah,
the
thank you,
greatest
Foster.
interviewer.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lapine, I can't thank you enough. And I hope one day we can have you in person at the Lambs so you could sign the book when it comes.
Magda, let me just, I'd like to end where we began.
Go
Some
ahead.
who came late might not know that this fabulous book, putting it together, how Stephen Sondheim and I created Sunday in the Park with George, is at the moment sold out.
Right.
But it will be back in bookstores. I hope sooner rather than later, Mr. Lapine, don't you?
Yes, and I think if you go online, you can order it at Barnes and Noble. But
Okay.
only online on Barnes and Noble.
Online. Barnes and Noble physical stores don't have any copies right now, but online, let's hope they do. But
Yeah.
folks, you've been listening. It's a fascinating book. Buy a copy. It's musical theater history that is presented in a completely fresh way. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I hope you'll all come to Flying Over Sunset.
We
I'm
will.
very curious. Okay.
We
Thank
will.
you so
Thanks for
much.
inviting me.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.